Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I'm still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. And do my eyes deceive me? Is this natural sunlight hitting my face for the first time in what feels like forever? I didn't even have to turn any of my ring lights on in my studio. I just let the sun hit my face. Oh my gosh, please tell me spring has finally sprung and we've gotten out of this gloomy winter. If you are following me on social media, you may have seen that this week I started a charity fundraiser. I have designed 5 designs and put them on a whole bunch of merchandise, a whole bunch of merch. These designs were inspired by 4 of my guests, and then I selfishly made a design that was inspired by myself. That's what you can do when you have your own show, guys. Anyway, these 5 designs are on a whole bunch of merchandise that you can purchase on my website, www.janetmcmordie, that's JANETMCMORDIE, mcmordie.com/store, and you can purchase any of these items. Now, these items will be, all the proceeds from these items, will be donated towards 5 different charities. These charities were selected by myself as well as the 4 guests these designs were inspired by. I've partnered with a really great, merchandising making company. I don't know what it would be called. And they are working with me to make sure that as much money as possible goes towards these charities. If you don't want merch, there is a donate button that you can click on my website and you can donate, and this will go to, obviously 100% go to these charities, and I will divide your donation evenly amongst these 5 charities, and everyone who donates will be entered to win a photo shoot with Studio Aviva. So Farah at Studio Aviva. She is an incredible photographer. You'll see lots of examples of her photography on my social media. She shoots clients in not just Toronto, but Vancouver and Los Angeles. You'll be entered to win a photo shoot with her. So generous of her to donate that. All right, let's get to this week's episode. This is an industry episode again this week, everybody. My guest this week is Courtney Harrell. Courtney is a screenwriter and a developmental editor. Now, I wanted to have a screenwriter on my podcast. I've wanted to have one for a long time because I think so often we hear the funny meme that the actors make the movie. False. It is the screenwriter. It is the person who wrote the dang thing, who has the idea. And we actors don't usually get to hang out or talk to the person who wrote the script. So she takes me through her process and how she writes. She writes very cinematically, and how she can visualize who she wants to play the characters in her story. She also has a great story herself. She used to be an actor, so she literally empathizes with what we all have to go through as actors. Please enjoy the incredibly talented Snuggles and Horror genre screenwriter herself, Courtney Harrell. Podcasting as well too?
No, but yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to, so my partner's a journalist, and she also she's done a couple of podcasts, episodes for certain podcasts, and then she's creating her own. So I started creating a podcast as well. My dad had always told me that I'm related to Edgar Allan Poe, which is awesome. So I actually want to go on a deep dive into is that true? What are the stories we're told in our ancestral pass down? Why do we get told these things? And it'd be kind of both about your family ancestry, but also am I actually related? And are all these people related to Edgar Allan Poe?
Ooh, that's so interesting. Because we do get that, right? I can think of so many people, just stories. Is it true or not? And also, does it matter? Because those stories are really neat that are sent down, but that's really, really cool. And it would make sense if you were, because then you got the genetic predisposition to writing cool stuff.
I know. I'd be like, thanks, man.
Yeah.
I also write really kind of dark, but type stuff. So yeah.
Well, yeah. Tell me your story. How did you get to where you are now? Because I know you have a theater background.
Oh, yeah. So that goes way back. So let's see. I'll start there and I'll be real quick about it. I grew up in San Marcos, Texas. I grew up doing theater in high school, and I really wanted to work in film, but there wasn't like at that time like a film program, and there wasn't like a big, just kind of like your own, like follow your creativity paths in schools at that time. So I really wanted to go to USC Film School, but it was really expensive even at that time. And I went to Texas State University and got my degree in theater. And while I was there, I interned at the Texas Film Commission, and I kind of like got my first gig in the film industry from that. So it just kind of was like a stair step of theater to film to production assisting to like kind of working on Varsity Blues and like hanging out with the camera assistants. And then I learned to load film, and then I got in the camera department. Then I produced commercials, and then I also was writing on the side and just kind of like, have been now working with clients, helping them develop their stories, but also focusing on my own novels. And I have some screenplays as well. So that's the quick, yeah.
So were you always a pretty creative person, do you think, growing up? Like, what brought you into theater school?
Yeah, I was. And I can honestly say I didn't necessarily... I had the support, I suppose, to follow that creativity, but I didn't necessarily have the, like, grounding to know that I could take that as a path. But I wanted it to be a path. So, as a kid, I would like dump out the bean bags and pull together my like He-Man and like G.I. Joes and like make little snow planets and tell stories, It was super fun and a mess.
So most of the people I chat with who are like what I'm calling these second act actors, right? People who got into acting after a different career had kind of had a bit of not negativity, because lots of us had lovely upbringings, but there was kind of this push towards like, no, that's not a good creative career, even though there was that creativity and storytelling that was so obvious as a child. Did you have that at all, or were you pretty supported in going into theater?
Surprisingly, I was really supported to go into theater. And I think the thing that like, while I didn't have negativity around like that's not a degree or a path, I didn't get I didn't have a lot of grounding in myself, like trusting my intuition. Like that was a very long process into adulthood of like, I just think I grew up in Texas, and we didn't, have a lot of deep conversations. There wasn't a lot of like, what are you feeling? Or like, to like really like look into yourself and say like, oh, I'm okay, I can take care of myself. It was kind of more this idea of people doing cool things like making movies or being pro sport athletes were kind of like special people. Like they were just really talented. But there was like that conversation of like, not that I was told I wasn't, but it was like the conversation of like, they're other people. We're just kind of, people. They're like special. So I think it took a lot for me to trust my intuition and trust myself.
It's interesting. So I just had a conversation with an actor originally from Texas as well too. And he came from a very traditional, he was a football player, and he was like a god in Texas. And he was like, I remember going to whatever university on a football scholarship and like walking past the theater and just like crying inside, like wishing I could do that, but like wasn't supported because like that was the culture he was raised in. Do you think that's unique to to Texas? Are we blaming Texas? But like, you're not the first. Well, we should. You're not the first person who's mentioned that as being like, this group of artists is other, and we're just normal civilians. Like, any thoughts on that?
God, that's really interesting. Like, I mean, I definitely think like football and kind of traditional sort of things are kind of like, in that arena in these kind of areas of the country, maybe because the opportunities aren't there as much, even though I worked in the Austin film scene and that was really growing. But at the time there were like a couple of major players like Rodriguez and, Richard Linklater. and you're like, oh, they're special, but like I want to do things like they're doing. And there was kind of like that, even like that prompt, like pumping up of the community too, like they're really cool, you know, but like everybody else is just kind of like helping them. And you know, I maybe that is just kind of like living in a more traditional kind of like conservative arena where people tend to think, you know, we do like manual labor, and that's good enough. And that is good. That's everything is good enough, you know. But it's like, I think if somebody has like a really deep wanting for something, I really want to support them to be that or do that or explore that.
I wonder if there's not as, and I see this in just, I think, in acting in general, and kind of society's definition of what like a successful creative is. Like, it's not celebrated to be pursuing it. You're celebrated when you're already there, like when you've achieved it, right? And so then nobody is helping people pursue because they're like, no, I just want to celebrate the people who are already there. And you're like, but I need to, how are we going to get more people there if we don't celebrate the journey all the way up, right? Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And that's something that I really like pay attention to too, because for myself, it's like you often see the finished product and then it feels so hard to get there that it kind of continues to promote this idea of like, those are really special people who somehow magically can like complete, you know, this or publish this or make this movie. But like, we don't get a lot of like all the stress and like the 20 years it took them to get there, or the 10 films they did that were shit that they threw away. And I'm gonna be releasing a book, a vampire novella in October 11th to kind of set you up for Halloween, and it's a prequel to my series Into the Darkness. And what I want to do, I'm gonna offer it for free on my website. I'm also gonna sell it for like, I don't know, 99 cents or something. And there's gonna be like a URL to a bonus content page to show you like the behind the scenes, like how long it took me. Here's some info about, here's my first like outline. Here's how different it is. Here's like a little bit about the process I went through, because I feel like it took me a year. I thought I'd crank it out in 2 weeks. Yeah. And this is just a novella. And I'm like, oh my God. But I think by going through those struggles, you start to also, when you give yourself really hard deadlines, you start to just be like, hey, this is good. Just get this out. And next time I can improve on this thing, or, you know, oh, here's what I learned on this. And I think that we just don't see enough of the behind the scenes. Yeah.
Well, we see that like, the picture perfect curated version of it. And I think, you know, people do kind of want to see that because it is the American dream, right? Like they want to see that it's achievable to do this and that it is possible. But when you kind of do that reality check of the struggle and all the stuff that's below the surface of the iceberg that you see on top, people are kind of like, oh, that's discouraging. I thought I could just get plucked from obscurity like I'm supposed to, right? Yeah. That's really cool. I'm excited to see that. So
cool.
How did you get into writing? Like, how did that start?
You know, it's funny because I actually never thought, like when I was a kid, I wasn't thinking about being a writer. I just loved telling stories with my like, I think I love daydreaming, honestly, because I can see these worlds and stories in my head. And like my writing is very visual. Yes. And I've been told that a lot. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to embrace that. You know, it's like some people write more prosy. I write kind of more cinematic. And that's just, I'm in the world when I'm doing it. And like, I think I got into it because I had these stories and I wanted to tell them. And for me, there hasn't quite yet been the medium that I think my brain would do the best in. Because what I kind of visualize is being able to like, almost like hook up like a headset and be able to like take the images I see in my head and put them into like a augmented reality sort of thing. And then I could like use my hands to like edit, like you pull out this scene and you put this one here. I mean, it's going to happen in the future, but I just had to find a way to get these stories out, and it turned out to be writing was the only way right now.
And so where do your ideas come from? Because they are so visual. Like as soon as I started reading, I could, And again, maybe it's just because I have a similar brain to yours, where I read something and I can see the world around it. I can see the movie that would be made.
Yeah.
So do you write with the idea? Yeah, I love it. I feel very, very happy that's the way my brain goes. So when you write, do you write with the thought of this could be a movie, or is it just that's not the end game, that's just how you output? If that makes sense.
I think it's both. Yeah, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's like, it is how I output, but I absolutely see these stories like that they would do really well as a movie. You know, they would do really well on film because they are really cinematic, and they're really like, I have this natural kind of like, I write really action-packed sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of movement, you know, and a lot of exciting kind of like colorful, like it's just very colorful and vivid in my head. So to me, it is a movie. It's a movie playing out that I'm just trying to capture in words as best that I can, while also just like literally being in the movie in my head, like you're talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a really good friend who I work with who, she's not a reader, because when she reads, and again, brains are so interesting, right? When she reads, she doesn't visually see around her. She just hears the narration in her head, and it drives her nuts. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. And I was like, oh, maybe fiction books would be better because that would be more imagination. She's like, fiction books are worse because like it's just yeah, right? It's like this, and so I think it's really fascinating how people see words on a page and how they. What happens up here? Like, it's just so it's so interesting to me. For you, I mean, kind of take me into kind of your screenplay world. I want to go back to the writing the books as well too, but I think for myself as an actor learning about the entertainment industry, and you've been a lot of different roles in the entertainment industry now, kind of screenwriting. Do you have any advice for actors, especially those of us who didn't go to film school or theater school, on how to kind of get more into the brain of the screenwriter, like in the role of the screenwriter?
Yeah. Okay. Wait. So explain that a little more. Are you asking like what the intention is on the page, or like where the story? Like, tell me more about what you. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that yes, and also I think the biggest thing I am guilty of, and I know I'm not alone, is we as actors think we are the center of the universe of the film, which is not true. We are just like the pawn, do the things, right? Where the beginning of this all, the genesis is the script, right? And so the screenwriter, and I think we as actors rarely get to interact with who wrote the page. And so, like, yes to the answers. Yes, please answer those questions. But also I'm curious about, when you write, do you think about the acting that will happen? Or what do you think about when it's going to be in production?
I do think about it. And what's really cool is because I have been on many sides of the camera. I actually even did acting too. So I did that in high school, college. I had an agent for a minute. So I plan to play at all these roles, you know. When I was writing the screenplay that it's on my website, but I'm finishing it up to start pitching it to agents. It's called Proud. I actually just did a table read for that. And the thing is, like, it's a comedy, which I don't normally think of myself as comedy, but it's really fun. It's like Overboard meets Love, Simon. It's really fun about like a coming out guy in San Francisco and his anti-gay rights grandmother, and they clash, and she gets amnesia, and he kind of like rebuilds his world to make her believe that she was actually a supporter. And it takes place in San Francisco. It's really vibrant. There's DJ music and all kinds of fun. And it's a definitely coming of age feel-good movie between family, that kind of like a rekindling of family. So I had actually wrote that when I lived in San Francisco, and I really, really thought about this character. Like, to me, she looks like the former governor, Ann Richards, the former governor of Texas, who was like the last Democrat in office there. She's very kind of like like very strong and like this big puffy kind of like white hair, and like the way that I envisioned that the grandmother in this, like I see her acting when I'm reading it on the page, like I see it. And when I did the table read, it was so interesting to see like a slightly different take, but then we had a conversation, like this actress just kind of like whipped it around, and then it was just like seeing the movie in my head right in front of me. And that was so cool to just like get this story just like brought to life and see how these jokes played out, and did they, or like how did somebody interpret this character, and maybe I got a different take that even works better. It was really fun.
Wow. And it's interesting because I've been told a couple times from casting directors, like when we go and audition for stuff and we get the sides that we have to audition for, a lot of times this is the first time that either the writer or the director is actually hearing it out loud. Wow. Is that the case for you, or do you kind of verbalize it out loud and kind of hear what it sounds like when you're not just reading the page?
Like, I absolutely hear it in my head. And I think it's something that it's funny, because I would think if I got to that point, when I get to that point in production, I would definitely want to hear it a few times, because I also would want the people, who were, well, I guess it makes sense if you're in casting, you haven't quite cast somebody yet, but like, I feel like it's kind of strange to only hear that for the first time, because you kind of don't know how somebody's going to interpret it, or does that joke work, or, I feel like it's kind of important to read it out loud, but I can't say that I read all my stuff out loud also.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It is. Yeah, so you have the screenplay. More of a kind of technical question for you. So if you write a screenplay, what do you do with it? Like, how do you make it go?
Make it go where?
I don't know. On the screen. Like, what? So you were saying finding an agent. So is that kind of the next, like, just logical academics, like the next step up the ladder?
Yeah, I think it's like you can do multiple things in the world, right? Because we do have more access to gear, equipment to film it ourselves. And I think like I kind of go back and forth, like my, short stories on my website, I've published myself. Like, I actually built them. I did some of the artwork for the covers, or I outsourced one of the covers. And I actually had a lot of fun doing that. But I think that like for the screenplay, because for me, I see it playing really well on Netflix. Like somewhere like that, where there's like a young audience who definitely loves LGBTQ stuff and comedy and kind of like that hijinks, zany kind of charming story. It really suits that crowd. So, and then Netflix doesn't really take unsolicited pitches. So then I would need to go through an agent to get it. And I do kind of feel like it would be really nice to work with somebody who, agent or manager, who could kind of like brainstorm and like spitball ideas with me about career momentum, because that is, you may experience this too. It's like, it's great to be surrounded by our peers who are doing the same things, but then it's like, how do we get outside of this realm, and like indie publishing is a big world, but it's like, maybe there's like kind of another direction I could go with traditional, or with, films, or, yeah. Anyways, I'm kind of like, yeah.
It's interesting. It's just interesting to hear, again, just learning about other parts of the industry that we kind of, again, because we're, as actors, narcissists. It's just I think it's so important to learn about how that process works. And I think that's why I'm so excited to see and hear about the behind the scenes work that it takes to write a story. So, yeah, like, kind of take me through your process, if you don't mind. Like, how do you put everything that's here onto page when you have such a visual mind and we don't quite have the technology to make that beautiful VR thing you were talking about? How do you work with that with your inspiration?
First of all, I'm also a Leo, so I'm also a narcissist, so I get it. So let's just like be narcissists together.
Woohoo!
Yeah. It's there's never one consistent process for how I do things, but I do think that like one thing is like when I was in San Francisco, I joined a workshop with one of my now really good friends. His name's Chris De Lorenzo, and he has these Laguna writer workshops, and that was the first writing that I like did around other people, where it helped my momentum kind of get going, which was like we would write during the workshop. There'd be timers. He was always so positive and supportive. Like we would never criticize each other. It became a very safe community where because you just wrote it, there is no reason to start criticizing somebody. Just like when you perform, there's no reason to give you critical feedback. It's like, let's first talk about what is working. What do we like about this story? What do we remember about this story? Because that starts to give you some insight into like what you're doing kind of naturally. And that really helped me to like take that out of the workshop into my own studio or, my own space and just be like, okay, I'm going to put a timer on. I always get really cozy. I put on these like sound canceling headphones, a hoodie. I get like into a nest, it's like my dream space. And I write, and I just remind myself, no need to criticize. Don't edit as you write. There's plenty of time to edit. And I just like live in the world, and I just kind of like get into the character and what's happening. And I usually have some sort of idea. And honestly, pretty quickly, I kind of know where the story's going and where it's going to end. And I don't know everything in between, but if I write, things will happen on the page because I'm living in this world. And yeah, I think that's kind of where I start. And after that, I go through a lot of revisions, and sometimes I pull out whiteboards and do like almost like, like that, like kind of like roller coaster arc, sort of thing. And like, here's the beginning hook, here's the middle build, here's the ending. And that gets a little more brainy, but I try to stay out of the analytical brainy mode as much as possible. But there are times when I kind of need to like plot it a little bit, but I don't start with plotting.
Okay. And do you still, like your revisions, do you give them to other people? Like, do you have a team that reads and says, ooh, maybe do this, maybe do that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
it's
cool.
it's been awesome. Like I also have worked as a developmental editor. So I have a group of other editors that we all kind of like help, each other and read and give some feedback. And my partner, Brina, she's like the first line of feedback, because first of all, she loves my story. She's read them all. She even named a genre that my stories fall under that she created, and she calls it Snuggles and Horror. So it's like both like you care about these characters because they're all like, like YA, like, like 15-year-old, 12-year-old, and you care about them and they're getting into these really dark places. You kind of just want to like snuggle them and hold them because all these like horrific things are happening around them. So
I love that. It's going to be the next like section on like in like the bookstore or whatever.
Yes. Hashtag Snuggles and Horror.
Yes, Snuggles and Horror. So where does the initial inspiration come from? Like, where did this story, like say for example, like Nirvana, the one that I'm reading about halfway through, like that's like, where did that come from? Where did she come from?
Yeah, that was really fun. Like they all kind of come from different places because I can literally be walking down the street and see something. I think usually visuals spark me, right? So that makes sense. And they'll come to me. That one I was going to a writer's workshop where we were all going to create a sci-fi world together, a space opera sci-fi world together. And we were all going to write stories within this world, even though the characters they're not the same characters or whatever. I went to Seattle, and this guy, Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon, were creating these workshops this like space. And it's all the stories were going into an anthology. And so we had our like 2 days like in a meeting room at the Museum of Pop Culture. And then we kind of like roamed around and got, just inspired by things. And for me, I just kept being drawn to the Nirvana exhibit, which is kind of like where the name came from. Also the idea of Nirvana, like, just like a perfect kind of feeling in space. And Nirvana was like a band that I grew up with. And I just kind of like, I loved it. And I started working on the outline for it because we kind of had to plot it first, which was like a reverse sort of thing for me. It was like kind of hard, right? And I changed it a little bit, but I got inspired by this kind of like, there's this thing called like the Rainbow Bridge and these like wristbands that light up rainbow and all kinds of stuff in there. And I got inspired by the idea of like darkness and rainbow. It's also how I came up with my website name, thedarkrainbow.com. And just like taking on this persona of like this, both the light and the dark. A lot of stuff happened at that. So I got inspired anyways at the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle.
Wow.
And kind of with a sci-fi space opera prompt.
Mm-hmm. And I think for me, like I think about, this is going to sound super silly. So myself and a lot of people who I chat with, again, very analytical brained. I would feel like so I'm a medical doctor, and so I spent a lot of my life prior to switching into acting doing very sciencey based things and thinking that there wasn't really like an art to it. And so I would fear that like going into a beautiful space like that, looking for inspiration and just not knowing what it is inspiring, you know what I mean? Like, because I would just walk in and be like, I got nothing. Nothing is important. Nothing is good, because I think it's a perfectionistic brain. Like kind of what you were saying, that like if I was to walk into an artistic space, an art gallery, be like, what inspires you to write something? I'd be like, I don't know. Because it's just, is there a training to that? Or do you think that's just because you've been so creative your whole life?
No, No, you're not rambling. I think that's a really cool question, because I think what you're getting at is something that I kind of want to put back in support to you and anybody who also feels that way, which is I also have felt that way. And I understand that, because it's almost like there's so much. Where do I start? Like, how am I going to find the right thing? And I think what I've had to get to, I feel very fortunate that my partner she's very intuitive. She's very like, she also does Reiki and hypnotherapy, and she's also a journalist. So she has both the like, intuitive side and the very fact-checking side. But something that she puts back on me is, I do know. I do know what inspires me. If I kind of want to encourage that with you and anybody else that's listening too, that like, if you laid out all these photos in front of you, I understand that you might be, or like, I'll just say about me, I might be afraid to choose the right one, the perfect one. And like, oh my God, this is a big deal. But I think inside there's almost like this little like light bulb, or like this energy that's kind of saying, but I really like this cat photo. But you like, maybe you just don't, you're like, oh, but whatever. Like there's like a skeptical thing that comes up that like, that's not the right answer, or like, that's not, but it's like, literally, it doesn't matter. It's like, there is something inside of us that says that we're drawn to things. And I think the more we listen to that and trust that and like follow that path, it's actually leading us down like, I don't want to say the right way. I'm trying to like get away from the idea of the right and wrong sort of thing. It leads us down the path that we are connected to, I suppose, that we're drawn to. And it's more of a trusting of our own creativity, because we're all creative beings.
Yeah. And our inner skeptic, I think, at least for a lot of people who came from other more, what's the word I'm looking for? Sensible careers,
Right.
That inner skeptic has been trained to be so loud, right? Saying,
Yes.
no, you can't. You like that cat photo? No, you need to like the bank. You need to like the credit union. You need to like the RRSP and the sensible shoes and stuff like that. So do you have any advice or any kind of techniques or suggestions for how to kind of tune in more to that little light bulb? Because it's like, you're right, it's there, but we just got some loud noises in the way.
Yeah. Oh my God. Trust me, I know. I still have to listen to that, because I tend to like also make a lot of lists.
Yes.
It drives Brina crazy. We were literally listing yesterday. She's like,
lists.
I know, right? See? I'm like, I need this so I can like look at them. And she's like, but I could just be doing them. I could already be. And I'm like, but it's chaos. And like, so, I think it's like the more it's like, because I've had to learn this, and it's like, it's there already. It's like the answers are there, not because someone else is telling us or guiding us, but because like it's already there in you. It's like, I think like, okay, so we moved to Oklahoma. We moved to Oklahoma City. We were living on Maui. So that is not a normal move. There were a lot of reasons we moved here. But the thing is, we came back from Maui after 3 years, and we took a big road trip last summer, and we were like, let's just go kind of see where we want to live. And Brina does have some family here, but she didn't grow up here. She grew up in the Bay Area. But we went on this big road trip, and like everywhere we went, we were like kind of tuning in to the space. Like, you know, we also kind of stated literally while we were sitting on the beach on Maui, or like, well, what would be kind of like next? Like, what would be like something we would want? And we really wanted friendliness. We wanted to be able to buy a home. We wanted to be able to be around creative community. We kind of wanted to be in an up and coming kind of creative space where people like really like bring you in instead of excluding you because you're not like hip enough or you're not far enough in your career or like all this kind of, you know, face value stuff instead of like, you're a good person and I want to know you more and like, let's create something or like, what are you doing? You know, like, we got here and we were like sitting here having lunch at this restaurant. We were like, do we want to move here? So we're like, gay pride flags and like, you know, we were talking with the like bartender and she was really cool and I was just like, this is weird, like there's a big film community starting here and like we're like, I think we want to move here. And we went up to like Minnesota to see some of her family and we kind of like came back, or we like went to Texas actually to see mine, came back, and then we went here again. Anyways, we just kind of like felt the energy and we both kept thinking about it. And I think that that's kind of like what I start to notice and pay attention to is if I'm either like continue to think about it or if there's a feeling that I get about something like that cat photo or moving to Oklahoma or in my stories. Like I like feel into, you know, is this the story that I want to write next? And somebody's like, no, you should write this other one because people are really interested in this one. But I'm like, but I don't know. I feel like I need to complete this. And I just have to listen to me because the only person who's going to be affected by not trusting that intuition is me. You know, I think a lot of people get put on them to have to be a certain way and think a certain way and like be straight, even if you might be gay, or be a lawyer because it's a family that, you know, lineage thing. But you're like, I really want to be a writer. Like, if we don't listen to that, we're the ones who suffer.
Yeah. And I think we think that others are going to be affected by that more than they are. Because like you were saying, like, if I don't become a lawyer, I'm going to be disappointing my family. I'm going to be doing this, X, Y, Z, other people around me. When truly, like you were saying, I think it really is the only person who's so impacted by it. Everyone else will get over it. Is you, right? And it's your life and your decision. Yeah.
And it becomes actually kind of like a ricochet. Because if you are unhappy and you're resentful and you're angry because you're not doing what you're really feeling inside, you don't listen to yourself, you do become a different person or to other people, whether it's to your kids or your partner or like your coworkers or whatever. You might just start to hate your work, and then it's like they're being affected by it. They're like, God, you're grumpy every day now. And it does kind of like bounce off of you into the world versus happiness also resonates to other people.
Totally. I think that's such a great point. And I think, again, that feeds into, we think we're the center of our own little universe and we don't see how much we can impact those around us positively and negatively, right? So I like that. Do you have any advice so we as actors get told all the time, because it's such a hard industry to get into, right? There's not many successful actors, which is fine. We're always told you need to create your own things, right? You know, write your own screenplay, do your own movies, write your own stuff. Do you have any advice for anybody just starting out writing a screenplay? Any tips?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think like, oh, that's a big question, because I, as a writer, we're told like, you know, write your thing, publish your thing, like, market, do all your social media. It's just like, God, we're all doing so much right now. And I think that like I see the point, because definitely we kind of have to be our own promoters. And I think the biggest hurdle probably to maybe the next step in our career is ourselves and needing to just put something out there, period. Because, you know, so what I'm thinking is that, you know, people write something really short that you could film, like make it bite-sized, like do something that's so tiny, like a 1-minute short film. So follow whatever that one kind of topic is, and just write something, and maybe have a couple of people read it, obviously, get some feedback, but don't worry about getting it perfect. Like, I think give yourself a deadline. Like those 48-hour film fests, like, I'm like, okay, I haven't done one, but I really want to do one, because it's kind of like the epitome of getting something done without being perfect and having a hard deadline where it's finished.
Yeah.
But then how cool is it that you have something to show? And I think that part of the battle, honestly, is just having something to show. I think a lot of people want to do things, but don't, you know, I don't want to say don't prioritize. I don't want to make it a negative. It's like we get in our own way that it needs to be like this polished, you know, like Marvel movie that we see, and are like, no, just make a little home video on your phone, because at least you have something to show somebody. And you learn so much in the process of like what it's like to write something, to film something, to edit it, to literally complete it and put it up on a streaming, you know, like Vimeo or something. There's a lot of learning in there. And you get to work through some of that like fear and, you know, making yourself wrong for not doing it as good as like, you know, Steven Spielberg. It's just like, no, like, you know, like we can't, but we're holding ourselves to those standards when we literally just need to like, you know, be like a, you know, 6-year-old again, or like a 10-year-old with like a little Super 8 film thing, you know, and explore and explore, discover.
I think that's great advice. And it comes back right to what we were talking about at the beginning, right? Like, we aren't celebrated for pursuing it. We're celebrated for being Spielberg. When you're there, that's when we'll say, yes, you are now a writer. You are now an actor. When you're like, no, come on, Is there anything that you are looking forward to kind of coming up this year? Anything coming down the pipeline for you?
Oh, man. Yeah, well, I mean, of my own stuff, like I have this vampire prequel, The Darkness Inside. I'm really excited about it. It's set in like 1800 Paris, and it's the origin story of a vampire it's YA, but it's the origin story of this like, you know, teen who is seeking revenge, and, you know, maybe finds the only way to do it is to die, you know. But it sets up a big character that's in my series, Into the Darkness, that is a 3-book series, a vampire story. And that one is it's like Oliver Twist meets The Lost Boys. It's like gang of vampire boys, 1900 New York City. You know, there's not like this crush and love stuff, which I read all the Twilights, but I'm like, it's not that kind of vampire stuff. It's like, it's gritty. It's like The Outsiders, you know, it's like that kind of thing.
Cool.
Yeah. So that, and then Proud, you know, which is the screenplay that I'm going to be pitching to agents. So those I'm really excited to get out into the world. And yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
Awesome. You'd mentioned your family and your partner a bit. Would they describe you as a writer, or how would they describe what you do for a living? Or just like with your life?
Man. I don't know how my parents would describe me. That's an interesting question. I think like so many times, you know, like my mom was a first grade teacher. She's retired now. My dad worked for a phone company, you know, like being like the blue collar kind of like, you know, fixing telephone lines sort of things. And so like I think a lot of times my parents say like, I don't know where you got it from. And I also, at the same time, I'm told I'm related to Edgar Allan Poe. So I think that's kind of interesting to be like, if that's true, maybe that's where I got it from. You know? So yeah, I have no idea. I think they just think that I'm kind of fun and creative, and that they don't know how I got it. But I kind of just imagine they must have some creativity in them as well that they maybe haven't explored, you know? Yeah, but my partner would call me a writer. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Do you have, so I ask everybody this question, but do you have any, so I usually ask the actors like any favorite or fun on-set stories. Same question to you, but doesn't have to be on set. Like anything that you've done just in your life with your writing, with entertainment, with creativity, any story that has really impacted you or time.
Oh, let's see. This is so interesting because there have been a lot of things that have impacted my writing, but the one thing that was coming to mind for me is so kind of unrelated, but it is on film set. So that's like, when I was in the camera department, I got to work on this movie called The Guardian, which was like a Kevin Costner Coast Guard rescue swimmer movie. But I was like filming on the second unit stuff. So we went to a bunch of places, but one was Kodiak Island, Alaska. And I got to go up in like the Coast Guard helicopter. And it was so like thrilling and like kind of like nerve wracking, but also just like, okay, I'm with like legit professionals. And it was so funny to see like how exciting it was for me to be doing something that was so ordinary for them, but it was something that was so ordinary for them that became very thrilling and different for them because we had another helicopter flying behind us. And so while me and my camera operator were filming inside and we're like filming over the shoulders of like Coast Guard, pilots, like we were being filmed by a helicopter that had a camera mount on the front. So these Coast Guard pilots were like doing bank turns and like all kinds of crazy flying that you see in movies. And they were like, yeah, we don't fly that way. Like, that is not how you fly to get to a rescue. You fly direct and like whatever. But meanwhile, they're doing this movie cinematic things.
Yes.
So it was a really unique experience.
That's so cool. It's funny.
Yeah.
So I do, again, I work in the operating room, and I've been doing some things. I'm doing some surgical hand doubling for like medical TV shows, which is hilarious, or like medical consulting. And like I just thinking what you were saying about how the old adage is, do you want it to look correct or do you want it to look good? And the director wants it to look good, but the consultants or the pilots of the helicopters are like, but this is not correct. But it doesn't look good if you just fly straight to the destination and land. You need to make it swoopy and exciting. It's the same with like any of the operations and stuff. I'm like, this is how they would do it. And the director's like, well, that's boring. Can you flare it up a bit? I'm like, okay, yeah.
I love it.
Cool.
You get to embellish.
Embellish. Yeah, but there is something about, I think, the idea of when it's routine for you and exciting for someone else, that really, I know, fuels my creative fire. Like anytime I'm on a set and it's just so new to me, I'm usually just like, oh, it's like I'm at Disneyland. And I was on a set a couple weeks ago and the director's like, God, you're just too excited about everything. And I'm like, well, you do this every day. And I don't. Like you said, if you were to come into the operating room, like we've had people like watch and stuff. Like I had the actress who I was doubling came in to watch me actually work, and she was like, oh, "This is amazing!" I'm like, "I do this every day, right?" So, it is cool to have that experience and to feel that excitement from someone else. Yeah.
Yes. And I want to push back and say, like, if that director said that and they were kind of snarky about it, big F you, because it's like, hey, there is no you're too much. If somebody says that, they're actually probably feeling like they're too boring inside. So like, if somebody criticizes us, I think, we're just so used to feeling bad about it, but it's like, nobody gets to do that. Let's push it back on them and let them kind of figure out their stuff, because you're perfect.
That is such a good point. Good point. We have to deal with too much criticism. It's so true. Do you have any final, no pressure, but final words of wisdom or advice or anything like that?
Well, it's actually what's coming up for me in this moment is actually to you and to other actors. So having been a producer on commercials, one thing that really stuck with me, and also having acted, it's like there were times when I'd be in commercials and we would have people, come in and they would read the part so great, And what happens is we're literally putting people into categories, and we were debating between people. Like, they did great for this and they did so good too. And like, how do we choose between them? And a lot of times people get picked because of, you never know. It's like they look good with this other person that we're casting, or they had this strange, like we cast this guy who was a model, but it was supposed to be kind of comedic, and he had this like rib that was a little more poked out, and like he made it more prominent, and like we chose him because of that too, It's like, so I think what I want to say is you're doing great. You don't get discouraged. If you don't get the part, you don't get 10 parts, you're still doing great. You have no idea what's going on behind the scenes and how close you came. And I know that's almost not encouraging, but what I want to tell you is like, don't feel bad. Don't give up. Like, just keep doing what you're doing and being you, because often people get chosen because of like them and their specific look and their performance, but also like you just never know what that one thing is. And I think I just wanted to make it encouraging that like, if you don't get the part, what you don't get is also how great you did and how close you came, and how we wanted to just say, damn, if there's another role, like we'll think of you,
Yeah. And I think it's hard because we don't get much feedback like that.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible to, because nobody has endless amounts of time to be giving feedback. And also nobody wants to be, like, I've chatted with directors and a casting director who said very similar to that, right? She's like, I also don't want to tell actors, you were so close, like next time. She's like, I don't want to give them false hope, because again, the next time that comes around, it's going to be just as unpredictable. But you don't want to get people's hopes up and then crush them. But also, they're doing good work.
They're doing great work. And I think the more you put yourself out there, the more it's like you're almost like, it's like the lottery. You put yourself out there 20 times, or you only buy one ticket. Like, what are the odds,
Yeah.
You kind of just keep going. And if you love doing what you're doing, like, just keep being you and keep putting yourself out there.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Courtney, for sharing your story this week. Thank you so much for talking me through the ins and outs of screenwriting, listening to my silly questions about where does a script go once you've made it. If you're interested in learning more about Courtney, what she has to offer as a screenwriter and a developmental editor, all of her ways to contact her are in the show notes below. Her nom de plume is c.darkly if you want to check out some of her work. She has incredible novellas for sale on her website. There's also the free one that she talked about. Her Snuggles and Horror genre writing is so good. I highly recommend you check it out. We talked so much about her genre of writing in the podcast you just listened to, so definitely read it and you'll hear exactly what she means by writing cinematically, writing action-packed, the color that's involved in all of her characters and her stories. She's so dang talented, everybody. I'm so thrilled that I got to chat with her. I hope you'll tune in next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye!